I would like to know, why is there suffering? Why is there suffering?
Why is there suffering?
Yeah.
Is this what you're asking? Just so as to be fair, because obviously these questions have been asked many times over the years. And some of them were asked more specifically, more like bringing something horrifying from our collective history. Right? Oh, don't need to do that, we can bring something now, what's happening right at this very moment. So why is there suffering? If everything is so beautifully, right, outlined in this, right, and Shiva is all there is, right, God is all there is, why is there suffering, right? The legitimate question. So can you just say a little bit more, so that I don't want to just talk hypothetically, and I presume you're not asking it hypothetically. Maybe you're asking on behalf of humanity. Maybe you're asking on...
Ever since I remember being a little girl, and I thought, fuck this. If this is the way the world is, I'm not playing. I'm not going to, and I'm not, I resented it. I resented God and the way it is. And when I look at, the suffering in the world, the war that's going on right now, and the wars, and I just think, if Shiva's so great, if Shiva's so good and all-knowing, and we're all part of Shiva, we're all... What does he have to? Does Shiva have to do it this way? Why does it have to be this way? Ignorance and suffering. Why can't we just be enlightened right off the bat? Why do we have to go through all this?
Mm-hmm. Very, 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 very fitting question. At some point, one wakes up with this question and one goes to sleep with that question. And though I may physically appear as being more junior to you, trust me, I've spent quite a number of years with that kind of dilemma. Why is there this suffering? Who is suffering? I mean, where is this suffering come from? Because it's not all just, right? Because you see that we can't just now... of course, I'm saying we can find a perfectly elaborate response, and this is what I'm going to do now. We'll give maybe several angles at this, because, you see, there are a variety of perspectives, and that's why it makes it so not so straightforward. It depends on downright metaphysical perspective even that we apply here to understand whether this is indeed how we perceive it. So, according to some of these perspectives, the question of suffering is dealt in a way that not all these perspectives square perfectly. So let's look at some of them. So let's first start with a canonical because it is established, if we are to now look for answers to the Orient, to the Vedic culture, which is at the basis of all Oriental culture currently, right? The entire Eastern thought per se, Eastern way, is influenced and has its roots in Vedic culture, Vedic civilization. We can go as far as Japan, to the very exotic way of how it is all taken to the extremes of the refinement. Anything that the Japanese seem to put their hands on, it reached the state of unparalleled refinement. But even Kakuza Kakura, some over 100 years ago, in his famous The Book of Tea, he made it very clear that everything that one can find in the Orient would have to be and can be traced to India. So we go to the source, and this is accepted throughout widely, the concept of epochs, yugas, this concept of time. It's understood to be as not linear. The time itself is seen as concentric. And it's a science of Manvantara. So this concentric concept of time, I'm not gonna blow our minds here with the exact mathematical equations, because there are. I don't even remember them because they're so, but in a nutshell, these epochs are known as, right, 4 yugas. The Sat Yug, Dvapar Yug, Tret Yug, and or Sat, Tret, Dvapar, and Kali Yug, right? Which corresponds in the Occident to the Golden Age, Copper Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age. Quite neatly as well. It corresponds to that when all this memory of the Golden Age. In the Golden Age, there was no religion, no spiritual practice, no need for code of conduct. Everything vibrates and chimes in harmony. So that's Sat Yuga. Sat is the term. Sat, truth. Everything is steeped in truth. So this concept of Manvantara, we'll get back to that in terms of the view of time itself, how long it is, why it takes so long, let's say, in terms of its relation to preceding yugas. What's interesting is that in that configuration, this so-called Golden Age, that Sat Yuga, is the longest. It lasts hundreds of thousands of years. Then, what happens is that what Sat Yuga is characterized by is the full presence of natural law manifesting itself throughout the entire creation. In other words, the natural law manifests and not hidden, not obscured, not perplexed. That's how it is viewed traditionally. We're speaking about it from that canonical perspective. I'm not making it up. I'm not getting second guesses. I'm simply giving that traditional perspective on the concept of time and why there is suffering. Suffering comes whenever there is a diminishing of the manifestation of natural law at the plane of what is known as Dharma. Dharma is that what is spoken of as the field of interaction, the field of action, what each and every one of us are born to do, inborn duty, right? Like the sun's inborn duty is to shine for whatever billions of years, that's all there is. It shines, it's its job. Imagine sun doesn't have morning and evening. Like let's say we impersonate the sun. It just shines like that all the time. That's it, for billions of years. No coming and going, nothing, no change, no transformation, no ignorance, no enlightenment. It doesn't forget its nature, it doesn't remember its nature, it cannot be even Shiva. We'll link that to the discourse earlier because it's fascinating. What we touched upon earlier is very important to see why we are so privilegedly positioned here. A dharma of an ant doesn't even have individuality. Just constantly going somewhere and all of them going somewhere, and then they found food and then they're just rolling in and just like, have you observed ants? Mind-boggling. So everyone, whenever they do what they're born to do, seems everything is fine. So in that Sat Yuga, 100% natural law is manifests. No need for language, maybe even, sorry. No need for language, no need for religion, no need for spiritual practices. Nada, no need for all that. Everything is as it is. Everything follows its so-called inborn qualities. No part violates the whole, no whole violates the part. Then what happens is somehow there is this diminishment of the natural law begins to take place. And that's when the next yuga kicks in. Or with the kicking in of next yuga. We don't know, a chicken and egg story here. So with the diminishment that heralds the beginning of another cycle, another epoch. And that epoch is known for 25% of the natural law is no longer manifest. There is this analogy is that Dharma is now on 3 legs. Before it's on all 4, like a study table. Now 1 leg is gone, so it's on 3. It's less stable position. So something already to compensate that is required. Maybe this is the time when a greater level of communication is required, because that communication on the level of telepathy, synchronicity, serendipity is somehow gone, cannot be taken for granted. Language is born. Communication is required. Codes of conduct maybe need to be laid out. Some perspectives emphasize that this maybe is the time when first religious teachings begin to appear, first spiritual teachings, because it is required. Further down the timeline, a next epoch comes in, and another 25% loss, so it's 50-50. It's a 50-50 now. 50% manifest, 50% unmanifest. And so now you can make it yourself clearly. In Kali Yuga, it is known as the age of darkness. In the Kali Yuga, the age of ignorance, only 25% of natural law manifest and 75% hidden, unmanifest. So it's like literally stumbling in the dark most of the time. Everything runs into something else. Very little coherence. Chaos prevails. Perplexing is the time of Kali Yuga. All Dharma is violated. Let's go like, if you want to go into that language, right? 1 leg is now. One leg is a balancing act. See? So this explanation, let's say canonical explanation of where the suffering comes from. It comes from diminishment of the manifestation of natural law, which is taken for granted in, let's say, Sat Yuga, and in Kali Yuga, it's the total reverse of the situation. Somewhere I've heard it's like an analogy is given. In Kali Yuga, when you wake up out of bed in the morning, be careful because you just by looking across your shoulder, you can twist your neck or something like that. Like the things just like unreliable. And exaggeration maybe. But if we look around, there are plenty of signs of things being horrendously not right. And also what's bizarre is that there is this continued conversation, an ongoing conversation of how messed up everything is, right? How everything is totally, entirely, and utterly messed up. I've promised already to a student who is no longer my student, but I'm grateful to him. And I'm under the vow of not swearing, but it's really feels, I'm holding my tongue, biting my tongue, Everything is, you know what I'm trying to say? But I can't say it, so I'm saying it's messed up. But it's some kind of like, it's like flat key, It's not, doesn't have like ding, ding. So messed effing up. And everyone knows, everyone sees that very clearly. See? Very clearly. And yet we're all playing the charade. Continuously playing the charade. You see? These conversations, these explanations, things are so damn straightforward. They are messed up. And it's the most apparent in the way that everything is turned into a lie. So the Orwellian state that's what we live in, the time of the Orwellian universe. When truth masquerades, when lie masquerades as truth, right? When, as Malcolm X uttered or said, that the whole purpose of propaganda making you love those who are aggressors, I'm paraphrasing, and hate those who are being aggressed. This is the purpose of propaganda, the purpose of twisting our minds. And yet we see that through, and we still continue playing that games. Some people get fed up and get nervous breakdown. Some resign. Some just like really cashing on it, Like small, petty little people like Tony Blair. It's just like, the guy became the highest paid speaker of all times. Do you know what prices he commanded after he messed up the country? After he, against the will of his own party, the entire Labour Party did not want to go to Iraq. The entire nation didn't want to go to Iraq. And he managed to single-handedly go to Iraq, take the country to Iraq. How could he do that? Well, if you don't know politics, then you wouldn't know that, because you will think, indeed, how is it possible? Didn't Queen have something to say? Well, during the time of the Second World War, prime ministers never had the power prior to that. So Churchill was a very clever clock. Okay, he was a very clever politician. Son of a gun, but nevertheless very famous one. Right? We kind of admire him, but he was an evil incarnate if we are to really square all that across the nations. It's so easy to have Hitler and Stalin as scapegoats and Mao Zedong. No, it was shared stuff. Shared, squarely. He said to the young queen, when things started to get messy, when London started to get bombed severely, if you want me to do something, dear, I need to have a complete and unparalleled, unprecedented level of command. Because before that, everything needs to be confirmed by herself to begin with. You see? So there is exclusive rights are given. These exclusive rights, for example, are given to the President of the United States at the moment of inauguration. This is why in the movies, the joke, president, as soon as become president, where's that button? Every president wants to see the button that he can press, right? If you want to end the world, I'm the man who can press the button. Right? These rights are already given. And Prime Minister did not have these rights. So that's how Tony Blair could do this, because these rights were never taken away from prime ministers, of all the prime ministers that England has seen since the Second World War. Maybe the time demanded that. But you see, it became that what otherwise not in the domain of how the whole system of parliament in the United Kingdom, which kind of wanted to make sure that power never ends up in the hands of one man. And we saw that it's exactly what happened. So where is the freaking democracy? To me, it was a biggest eye-opening. To me, this was on par with awakening. To me, this was a real Kundalini. You see? To me, seeing that in my early 30s, how messed up world is, just as you said, I'm no longer playing these games. I'm out of here. No games. Okay? I'm sailing my own ship from now on, because this is not a fair play. Something nasty going on here. And this nasty only at the, we know that everything is fabricated anyway, constantly fabricated. That is Kali Yuga. Because the minds of these beings are perplexed. Perplexed. We talk about politics. What are politics? Let's get to the bottom of it, huh? Are you with me? Or am I boring? Am I boring you? No?
Einstein, said the only real question is this universe a friendly place or not? And he said it was, and so that's anyway. I just feel like the way it is, it doesn't seem very friendly, and also, how can I feel there's no way to have basic trust, to live in this world with basic trust and feel insecurity, and so there's always this fear, living in fear, because everything's so crazy,
So let's keep unraveling it, okay? Shall we continue? Shall we continue? Because we want to get to the bottom of it, at least to peel some layers. So there's greater clarity. We speak about suffering. So in this day and age, right, that let's say when 75% are hidden, what happens is that people who are expressions of collective consciousness, right? Because every single leader of any kind, when he becomes a public figure of political stature, where he begins to represent certain ideologies and certain number and groups of people, to the degree that he or she may become the head of the state, these are no longer people. Make no mistake. These are no longer just people. They are manifestations of the state of collective consciousness. Therefore, we cannot just, as I said, make some historical scapegoats. No country has ever seen a philosopher king or sage king or a tyrant and a dictator, because whilst the population of that country was all speak and span, it just doesn't pan out like that. It just doesn't work like that. We will go more into this whole of possessions and repossessions in the coming days. But for now, when people become heads of states, and when decision of a single man or a woman can take country here or there and impact life of many people, millions of people, Some power must be there accompanying these people. And it's not just some power. This political power is a manifestation of the collective state of consciousness. See? It's a manifestation that there is something that is a barometer of the level of consciousness of the nation, we could say. So, hoping that there will be elect good ruler, president, prime minister, whatever we may call him or her, is a wishful thinking, because there is no such way as someone coming into the office with good intentions, unless the status of the consciousness of the nation is transformed and on a rise, let alone at a high degree of its unfoldment, that it will actually manifest such leader. This has to be understood once and for all by all of us who frequently spend time on our butts sitting here. We might as well do something else. If we don't understand this, we're still stumbling in the dark in terms of this true state of affairs when it comes to the policies. The word politics themselves, the word politics comes from the Greek term polis, city-states. Remember? The first city-states. They were not even countries. They were single city. This is the unique way of the ancient Greece. Each city was a country, like Monaco. Monaco is a country and a city. That's all there is. Monte Carlo or Monaco. People get confused. Which one is Monte Carlo? Which one is Monaco? They're both. You came into one and you are in Monte Carlo, Monaco. Monaco is a country, Monte Carlo is a city. Whichever you prefer to call it, it doesn't change a thing. Okay? So in the same way, these policies, these city-states, were organized in such a way that these ideas, you see, these seeds, the seeds of democracy were planted there, that people wanted to create a governing structure where quite a large group of people can coexist together in as organized and as fair way as it is possible for them at a given moment in time. At let's say, what circumstances allow. So these policies would have, obviously, the places where they discuss the affairs of that city-state. And the politics, the word policy, was born out of that. You see? But it means completely something else right now, because it was born out of a genuine intention to thrive, to protect from the potential invaders, to make sure that there is enough food when the winter will come, to make sure that there is taking care of this and that, elders taken care of, women taken care of, the class of warrior, the class of scholars, the class of this, the class of that. You see, all this was an organized ways of living. Because otherwise, and we're talking about, this is in ancient times, ancient Greece, not modern Greece, ancient Greece. So, policy and politics is a very important concept, very important concept. Only people of the highest stature were chosen to represent the affairs of the state. But this didn't last long. It was a very, very short period of time historically, flickeringly short, because a tyranny quickly came to replace this, a true tyranny, you see? Not short of dictatorship. And from there on, our history is a continued history of all tyrannical rulers and leaders. Some better, some worse, all depends on their qualities, you see? Some of them are horrifying, but then you look more into the way how they dealt with, and wow, actually, Genghis Khan was a brutal ruler, but the more you learn about it, not as brutal as I thought. Because, we made them into barbarians. Every Roman emperor was fantastic, fluffy, smelling good. Because they're Romans, you see. Everything that goes from beyond the Bosphorus gets the tint of the, barbarians. We still live with that concept of white supremacy. This is what still continuation of that F-up world. All Kali Yuga. Concepts are created, philosophies are created, well, not philosophies, more like ideologies are created to justify evil deeds. Because you can't make people do evil deeds, because people, the core of our selves, the essence of who we are is goodness. You see, it's goodness, it's inherent there. So in order to make someone do horrible thing, you need to have ideologies that will free them from that sense of, that inborn sense of, I'm doing something wrong. You see, when I'm hurting a cat, I'm doing something wrong, So if you call people rats, then very, very easy you can treat them as rats in any given historical situation. History only repeats itself. So where is the roots of this? Where all the roots of that? You see? So from the philosophical perspective of the Manvantara, it's the laws of the natural law. So the perspective that Veda, of the Vedic knowledge, operates here with is not to get lost in, well, where is the roots of evil? Because we can't locate where that, let's say, how we can trace what is the cause of suffering. What causes the suffering? And there's so many factors will be brought in if we truly look for. You see? So many factors. But rather, what causes that? And the cause here is in the laws of that, what's supposed to take care by everything, by virtue of its inborn nature. So that's where the emphasis is being put. The emphasis in Vedic civilization was put into restoring these vibrations where they suffer. Where there is a loss of that keynote we spoke the first night, where the loss of that sound, where the frequency somehow becomes vacant. And soon as the frequency is vacant, it becomes the breeding ground for anything goes. So that, in other words, now speaking more in that kind of pedestrian language, the minds and hearts of men are easily corrupted. See? Easily corrupted because of this becomes a possibility. It becomes a possibility, you see? Like that proverb in New York, if I don't steal it, someone else will. Someone better be me, see? So, you see, this where does it come from? Why? Well, because 75% of that is not manifest. So, what rather question here should rise? How can that be remedied? How can that be restored? We can waste our entire life in depression, in despair, trying to locate the source of suffering. And we're coming now to the second part, right? Which is more devastating in terms of its sheer audacity, because it annihilates the idea of suffering at a perspective that needs to be truly understood. But first, let's not dismiss this opportunity, not bypass this opportunity, to see that what is required there and then is to make sure that during the time of darkness, some form of light is turned on. It's as simple as that. If it's only 25%, it's like we talk about light, dim, even unpleasant. Like, it's not a candlelight dinner we're talking about, right? When you want to sit cozy and nice and just a candle there, we're not talking about that. But if you want to kind of see and enjoy each other's company, I want to read something, I want to see, like, I want light. And if it's only 25% and dim, it's annoying. And then I go somewhere and I bump my head, or bump into someone and there's a ruffle, shuffle, and a brawl in the hallway. Nobody is guilty, they just bumped into each other. You hit me, you go, boom. I'll show you now. It was just dark in the hallway, you see? You open the cupboard and, like, dragons start to climb out of that because of the darkness. And so this is, lightheartedly speaking, is a serious situation. And the only remedy here is to simply keep bringing the light. Keep bringing the light. Keep supporting that what is a balancing act. That's why spiritual orientation in life is a must, because things cannot be taken for granted. If we were born in Sat Yuga, we'll be doing something else now, completely. What retreats? What religious code of conduct? Spiritualism? What metaphysics? What for? Everything does, everything flows, everything hums and vibes in perfectly orchestrated manner. But in Kali Yuga, the setup is such, the situation is such, that we're all stumbling in the dark. So that's what creates the possibility for the corruption. Okay, I mentioned that name, name is maybe, let's rehabilitate. Tony Blair, it's not his fault, it's not his sin. No, he was simply tempted. Everyone would become tempted. And that's what the politics are. People who come into politics should be people of the highest stature. People who are independent from any needs. They're almost like we speak about here, they should come from a place of plenty. They should come from a place of complete and utter fullness, completeness, so that their life become only that of service and nothing else. Not even a shadow falls on how I can utilize this situation for my own good. It doesn't even enter. You see? But how can people like this come into the cabinets, into the offices? How? It can only happen if the collective state of affairs, if collective consciousness is high enough. Then, and only then, the possibility is introduced when such people can manifest, as it were, out of the blue and become literally the torchbearers to continue further expansion, because it works in that way. See? Soon as the collective consciousness on the rise, it prompts the rise of these individuals. And these individuals then, circumstances fall in such way where there is a possibility for a greater leader coming to the country. Historically speaking, these were these little openings, little windows where we have seen warming up. I remember that myself as a kid, in a complete time of the Cold War, there's this warming up took place, where as a kid I stood in a 2 or 3 hour long queue in old town of Tashkent with my mother, who took me to the exhibition of the advancement of the American life, because it was allowed. You see, the warming up of the relationships during the Jimmy Carter took place. He was just recently honored, already in a wheelchair. Some people try to throw some dirt and, at him, because no doubt. But to me, even like as a kid, I looked at the Jimmy Carter's picture and I thought, I like this man. He looks fun, okay? And his smile looks genuine. Big teeth, I thought, but never mind. And I even had this thing, a round thing from the exhibition that, it was like I visited extraterrestrial ship. In Old Town, you should understand the experience. Old Town of Tashkent, shanty town. Cobbled, not even cobbled, they are clay streets, clay bricks, clay and straw walls, serpentining the queue, until you come into this built pavilion and lights. First time in my life I saw so much neon lights. It was blinding. Seeing the kitchen, to me it didn't look like a kitchen. To me it looked like a spaceship from a movie I haven't seen yet. And women were demonstrating how they make food, how they wash the dishes in the dishwasher and throw the clothes, sitting down on a chair and watching the Vogue or the magazine, And my mother was standing there looking at it. And I was standing there and holding the Wii, because it was such a long queue. And now I don't want to spoil the thing, Still, it's a time of warming up, during the Iron Curtain, during the time of separation. So, all this suffering, forgive me, is self-inflicted. We inflict it upon ourselves. And likewise, there is way out of that suffering because we are here, the beacons of light. Everything that happens in your heart and in mine impacts that man or woman who maybe even in their current state of affairs might begin to experience different vibrations at the heart level, and then the frequency of that will reach the mind and they will begin to make different decisions. With that being said, some of these people calcified to such degree that nothing will change. So we are therefore heading on for the collision of light and darkness big time. It's only going to increase. So we have to truly be committed to what we are, to who we are, more than ever. Where is this suffering? Where it comes from? There are different perspectives. Esoterically, philosophically speaking. Vedantic perspective refutes the idea of suffering. There is no suffering. Because the world itself is seen as an appearance in consciousness, appearance in awareness. So it's taking place, but it's not. It's as if happening, but it's not. So from that point of view, none of this is real. You see? So already from that perspective, there's no suffering. This suffering is only apparent. Of course, that does not mean that one does not experience pain, physical pain, emotional pain, because that's what it means to be alive. But if you want esoteric perspective, spiritual perspective, then there is such perspective. Let's speak about the nature of ultimate reality. How can God allow that? All these theologians in East and West tried to square the round peg, which is not easy job. How can the evil exist in the presence of one and the only, right? How can that? And all these theological perspectives of trying to explain it away, that evil itself is a fallen angel, right? The greatest, Lucifer himself was the brightest being. The brightest being. So bright, in fact, that his greatness eclipsed his common sense, we could say. And he challenged God, as it were. So, because he claimed that he has light of his own. So this is the idea. So he claimed that it is his light. So he challenged. So these various theological perspectives in East and West, trying to bring an explanation and clarity into the situation, particularly if this is a monistic perspective. How can God allow suffering? Isn't God perfect, and therefore creation is His, and it should be perfect? You see? And then all that theological work begins there and then, trying to explain where things gone astray. At what point? Where? How? Why? Some perspectives dismiss that altogether because it's all an appearance. Others see this as play of consciousness, that it's all for the sake of consciousness itself. And the more dramatic it is, the more thrilling it is. So in other words, at some point, it requires an unhumane level, or inhumane rather, level of understanding to reconcile this, what otherwise is bewildering, heartbreaking, time-churning. See? So in other words, we can't hold anyone accountable here for what is happening. Certainly we cannot hold God accountable here, because this religious perspective of who is in charge is of primal importance. And this is why it's fitting to bring this yet another reminder, we just did in Poland, of Carl Jung's suggestions to reevaluate and to review this, the Christian perspective on God. That there is this unconscious in God, this darkness in God, darkness in the light, unconscious. And it is fascinating because whether Jung meant this or not, whether he went as far or not, I'm looking for the support for the drawings we did today. But in that process of the descent, awareness, Shiva, undergoing these transfigurations so as to experience reality from the vantage point of singularity of this particular being, totally limited, totally compacted, contracted, a total and utter antithesis to the magnanimity of absolute, incomprehensible vastness. All these qualities brings on the way, as it were, the light to such contraction that it becomes unaware of itself. And that is Jungian unconscious in God. And in man, the possibility for God to return its true status becomes apparent. Do you see how revolutionary, how courageous and crazy Jung's idea was? Whether he drew the inspiration from somewhere is beside the point. Fact remains, this was a necessary departure from what, let's say, was already exclaimed by Friedrich Nietzsche a century before in his God is Dead. We still don't know whether this exclamation was constating the fact or a lament. Because God is dead is what it is. The religious idea that there is this super intelligence, that there is this supreme being, and then there is a creation and us in that creation, was undergoing tremendous reevaluation and transformation. So in other words, we live at the end of all religions in a way. It doesn't matter what and which religion now on the rise, what religions outlive themselves. The future of spirituality is that. This is why there is so much, in a way, this talks about the extraordinary revival of Tantra. Because Tantra is unapologetic about that. See? Tantra is life-affirming. It's not life-denying philosophy. It's life-affirming. And it has all these components of the perennial traditions of Anal Haq, or I am that, or Aham Brahmasmi. All there is this centrality of awareness. I am. So, this suffering, where does this suffering come from? The suffering is that unconscious. You see? But that unconscious is where it touches the ground and it begins to rise and becomes conscious again. So that whole process is now reversing and light returns. So Kali Yuga is also traditionally spoken of as the time when the God is nearest. There is this theological perspective that very, very common among the Hindus today is that one aspect of Kali Yuga that is unique is the nearestness of Brahman, or the nearestness of God to the individual whose heart is eager. You see? That's one unique feature. In other words, it only in the Kali Yuga, only in the time of calamity, the possibility for that communion is much more apparent than at any other time. When I came across this, it was fascinating to me as a concept. See? So it's not like, okay, the age of darkness and tough, deal with it. All right, okay, fantastic, great news, thanks. How long is it going to last? Okay, it's another several thousand, 100 years, whatever. Long time. But apparently, no, you can live your own Sat Yuga even amidst the Kali Yuga. So that's another perspective. See? So within this Manvantara, this concentric system, where it has all this concept of how time itself is measured, how the unit of time is measured. So this epoch, right? One kalpa is measured out of the duration of 4 yugas. 4 yugas. And the ratio, I don't remember exactly, but the ratio between Sat Yuga, which hundreds of thousands, then Dvapar is slightly less, then Tret Yuga is still slightly less. Finally, Kali Yuga is the shortest, but still long enough. Yeah, long enough. And altogether, it forms a kalpa, which is only one day of Brahma, the aspect of responsible for creation in the Hindus' Trinity. But in Vedic thought, before the Trinity it's spoken of in terms of that life of Brahma. Sorry, day of Brahma. Then lifetime of Brahma forms a day of Vishnu. A day of Vishnu. And then the lifetime of Vishnu corresponds to one day of Shiva. See? So it's incomprehensible. Mathematically, you can find out there are links there are like it's like it goes into these stratospheric numbers. So that within the dark age, light is always there. So one can leave that light, even whilst, let's say, the world at large, everything is dimmed. It is possible because of the unique way that we are. And it is true. There are human beings who have become the living examples of how they manage to not just to carry their humanity in the most of inhumane of situations, in the most unspeakable situations that they went through, but they became the very beacons of light. They became the very, very expressions of that, what the whole thing is about. Isn't that a confirmation that even suffering can be transformed completely and utterly into sheer bliss? See? It's the choice that we make. We can suffer, or that suffering becomes the fuel that makes our heart burn bright. See? So, reflect on this. Let's reflect on it together. Thank you. Thank you.